Okay, welcome everyone. Hello, so glad that you can join us this evening. My name is Katie Freeman, and on behalf of Mystery Writers of America, welcome to the 78th Annual Edgar Awards Symposiums. Tonight's discussion is with the nominees for Best Paperback Original. Our moderator tonight is Claire Johnson, and our bookseller is the Poison Pen bookstore in Scottsdale, which is a fantastic store and one I've been able to visit myself. You can learn more about the Edgar Awards by following us on social media using the hashtag Edgars2024 and by visiting the websites mysterywriters.org and edgarawards.com. A reminder that the Edgar Awards will be live streamed on our YouTube channel on May 1st. During tonight's discussion, I'll be posting links to our panelists and moderators' books in the chat. And please feel free and extremely welcome to submit questions in the Q&A box throughout the conversation, and we'll get to those towards the end of the hour. I'll remind you that your questions are very welcome and we would love to see them. And now I'll introduce our moderator. Claire Johnson's first novel, Beat Until Stiff, was nominated for the 2003 Agatha Award for Best First Novel and was a BookSense pick. Her second book in the series, Rue Morgue, received a starred review from Publishers Weekly. Fog City, her noir crime novel set in Prohibition-era San Francisco, is debuting in early June. Congratulations. From Level Best Books. This book is the first in a series featuring Maggie Laurent, PI, and she is currently president of Mystery Writers of America's North California chapter. So thank you everyone for being here this evening, and Claire, I'll let you take it away.
Thank you, Katie. On behalf of MWA, welcome to tonight's panel discussion with the 4 nominees for the Edgar Allan Poe Award in the category of Best Paperback Original. This year, we received over 275 books and ebooks to evaluate. It was a ride. First of all, I'd like to thank my fellow jurors, Christopher Chambers, Jesse Chandler, Gail Ost, Manuel Ramos, Ryan Silbert, and Peggy Rothschild. They deserve a big round of applause for devoting so much time on behalf of their fellow authors. We had a great collection of novels to read. They were very diverse, funny, some not so funny, historicals and cozies, which covered the genre in every possible permutation. Our 4 authors being interviewed tonight are the best of the best. Let me introduce them and then we'll get to the discussion. Welcome and congratulations, nominees. To begin with, A.F. Carter is unable to be with us tonight. He lives and works in New York City. He is the author of 4 books. All of Us is a psychological standalone. Boomtown, the novel nominated for the Edgar, is the 3rd book in the Delia Mariola series. Tracy Clark. What award has this woman not been nominated for? You are amazing. A native Chicagoan, she is the author of the Cass Rames Chicago Mystery Series featuring ex-cop PI Cassandra Raines. A multi-nominated Anthony, Lefty, Edgar, McCavity, and Seamus Award finalist. She is also the 2020 and 22 winner of the Sue Grafton Memorial Award and the 2022 Sarah J. Paretsky Award, which honors crime writers from the Midwest. Tracy was also nominated for the 2022 Edgar Award for Best Short Story, Lucky 13, which was included in the crime fiction anthology Midnight Hour. She is a proud member of Crime Writers of Color, Mystery Writers of America, and Sisters in Crime, and serves on the boards of BoucherCon National and the Midwest Mystery Conference. Hyde is her new police procedural, which features Detective Harriet Foster of the Chicago PD. Jess Lourey is the amazing Edgar-nominated ITW thriller Anthony and Minnesota Book Award author of young adult, magical realism, crime fiction, nonfiction, and children's books. She's a retired professor of writing and sociology, a recipient of the Loft Excellence in Teaching Fellowship, and is a TED Talk presenter. The Taken Ones is the first in the series featuring Van Reed and forensic scientist Harry Steinbeck. Scott Von Doviak, is that correct how I pronounced it? 20-year pop culture writing career includes 3 books, a stint as a film critic for the Fort Worth Star-Telegram, and a decade as a television reviewer for the Onion's AV Club. His debut novel, Charles Charles Gate Confidential, was called terrific by Stephen King. Wow, wouldn't I kill for that kind of blurb? And named one of the top 10 crime novels of 2018 by Tom Nolan of the Wall Street Journal. Low Down Road was published by Hard Case Crime and was quite a reading ride. Jesse Ku's Sutanto entry is titled Vera Wong's Unsolicited Advice for Murderers. She's published 9 novels for adults, young adults, and middle grade readers. She is most famous for her novel Dial A for Aunties, which won the 2021 Comedy Women in Print Prize in the UK, which has been optioned for a film by Netflix. Congratulations, Jessie. Sutanto received her MFA in creative writing from Oxford University in 2009. She published her first book in 2021, and as of 2023, she has published 9 books for readers of all ages, a veritable writing machine. So everyone, first of all, can you give us a brief rundown of your novel? Scott, let's start with you.
Okay, mine is set in 1974, opens up in Texas. Two ne'er-do-well cousins hatch a harebrained scheme to steal $1 million worth of pot from the local drug kingpin and drive it up to Idaho, where Evel Knievel is preparing to jump the Snake River Canyon and sell it to all the freaks that show up for this event. Things go wrong all along the way, and even worse once they get there.
Sounds great. It was great. So Tracy, you're next.
Well, Hyde is a police procedural featuring Detective Harriet Foster and her homicide team. And their case, as Hyde opens, is to find a murderer of red-haired, blue-eyed women, and he is killing them in the most horrendous ways, which is kind of fun to write. But he's hiding the bodies under things. So on the Riverwalk, under Wacker Drive in Chicago, where their book is set. And so they have to find this craven killer before he kills again. So that's Hyde in a nutshell.
I have Jess and Jesse. Jess, let's the Taken ones. Can you give us a snapshot?
Sure, but first I need to say that Hyde, Tracy, was my favorite book of 2023, and I think
it was really good.
It's so good.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Absolutely brilliant book. The Taken Ones features 2 BCA agents, a forensic scientist and a cold case agent, and they discover a woman buried alive who turns out to be one of 3 missing girls who've been missing for over 40 years.
And finally, Jesse.
So Vera Wong's Unsolicited Advice for Murderers is about a very lonely old woman who owns a tea shop. And one day she comes downstairs to her tea shop to find a dead body in the middle of it. And she decides that she's going to investigate the murder because nobody sniffs out a wrongdoing better than a suspicious Chinese mother.
I think one thing that really distinguished your books from the 275 other books is the sense of place. And I think you all captured quite nicely all these different locales. I mean, we've got, Texas and Idaho, we have Chicago. I am from the Bay Area, so San Francisco, I was like right there. And Jess, you too. I mean, let's talk about sense of place in the novel. Tracy, let's start with you because it was really very Chicago-ish, if I can use that term.
Well, it's kind of easy to do when I live here. I mean, it's just, I know where the streets are, so I know what they smell like. I know what they look like. And so I try to make it as much of a character as the characters themselves. So to give people a sense of what the city smells like and looks like and feels like. So when he's hiding the murderers, hiding the bodies, I mean, those are the streets that I walk on. So I sort of know where they go and who goes down there. Lower Wacker, which is sort of features prominently in the book. I mean, nobody goes down there to Lower Wacker or Lower Wacker, except the people who don't belong there. And so that's where I put one of the bodies because that's no place nobody goes or should go. So yeah, I sort of know the city. I sort of move it around from book to book. I like to sort of get all the neighborhoods in there if I can. Because each one is different. We've got 77 neighborhoods in Chicago. Each one of them feels differently. Different people live there. They smell this different. The music is different. They have a different vibe. So I try to move it around and try to get as much of the city in there as I can.
Yeah, and I think it's very important when you are writing a book where, I mean, you know, I've been in Chicago once when I was 10 years old because my mother didn't renew our passport on time. And we had to go from O'Hare. Yeah, it was a nightmare. We had to go from O'Hare to downtown Chicago. But I did not feel that it was an alien place. And I did the same thing with the rest of your books. I did not feel that these were alien environments. These were, you know, I felt like I was there. Jess, what about you? What do you, your sense of place?
Yeah, my books are always set in Minnesota. I
Right.
can't, even though I want to escape sometimes. In the Taken ones, the murder starts out, the body is discovered in right outside the warehouse loop of Minneapolis, of downtown Minneapolis. And it's sort of this halfway land between extreme wealth and just a lot of derelict warehouses right next to the river. And so I wanted to explore that. But then I went to a small town because I keep returning. For me, there's nothing scarier than a small town in Minnesota. Honestly, there's that connective tissue of a community where everybody looks out for each other, but it becomes so constrictive when people also decide to look away from what's happening in their backyard. And so that is just, it's something that I go back to in every book, and I dug deep in the Taken ones with it.
Yeah, yes, definitely you did. So Scott, you've got Texas and Idaho.
Yeah,
and
it's kind of
Evil Knievel, and I do remember Evil Knievel. I'm old enough that, you know, when you said, you know, when I read it was the Evil Knievel, I'm like, anyway.
It's kind of it's a little different because mine is a period piece. So like the first third is set around where I live now. I live in Austin, Texas, but I had to kind of put myself back into a time that if I didn't live here, I think just kind of try to capture the vibe of what it might have been like. And then there's a road trip section in the middle, certain stops along the way, some I was familiar with and some had to research. And then, you know, the whole event at the end at Snake River Canyon, you know, there's footage of it and there are articles written about it that I had to sort of dig into because I basically, the town that they're staying in up there, you know, I don't know anything about it. So I kind of invented my own version of that town for that part of it.
Yeah. And Jesse, San Francisco, have you been to San Francisco? If you haven't, you did a bang up job in recreating Chinatown.
Oh, yeah, I have, because I went to college at Berkeley. So I'm familiar with the Bay Area, and I feel like I'm pretty lazy as a writer, so I like to set my books in places that I have been to, you know, that I'm at least a little bit familiar with, because I don't want to do research. That's why a lot of my characters are writers or photographers, because I used to be a photographer. So the less research I need to do, the better. And
well, you really did capture it. And you know, I have often walked down Grant Avenue and looked at these little shops and wondered, how in the hell can these businesses stay open? They must be laundering money or you know, selling drugs out the back or something, because they've been there for years. They never changed, the displays never changed. And you know, and there's this whole other world back there. And I thought you really captured that really well. So did you guys grow up reading the classics of crime fiction? I mean, Scott, you have a pretty varied career. Jesse, you have a varied career. But Tracy and Jess are, you know, seems to be that crime fiction is your jam. So, Jess, what draws you to crime fiction?
Actually, first of all, Jesse, I love you admitting that you're lazy. It's so fantastic. You don't want to research. I love it. I actually read mostly horror growing up, and I find that there's a lot of crossover between thriller and horror, right? And it really helps with the pacing. And so I still read very widely. I have a degree in English, so I did read all the dead white guys growing up, but now I'm mostly drawn to crime fiction.
And Tracy, your police procedural queen.
Well, I started off like most writers, I think. Hardy Boys, Nancy Drew, Agatha Christie. I read all of those, and that sort of got me to the early part of the 80s when that great wave of female crime writers came. Sarah Paretsky, Sue Grafton, Valerie Wilson Wesley. So I started reading first. I knew early on that I wanted to write, but it took several decades before I had the courage to even try it. But as I was doing it, I was reading crime, reading mysteries, cozies even. I loved the puzzle of it. I loved the solving of it. And so when I started to write, I wanted to write things like that. They tell you to write what you know or write what you read. And that's what I sort of started out doing. And I sort of stuck with it. PI first with the series, and then police procedurals, which is kind of weird for me because I'm not a police officer. And so I have to sort of figure out how they do what they do and why they do what they do. And then on top of that, create a story that would be interesting for readers to read. So there's a big learning curve for that one, but it's enjoyable. The character's a little prickly. I still haven't I don't think I have a grasp on her completely, but I'm getting there. I think I'm learning a little bit.
You're getting there. Don't worry about it.
I learn a little bit more about her each time, but the police part of it is kind of important, and you want to sort of get it right. And you want to sort of make it seem that it could be real and that you could sort of go out of your door and find a character like this, working at a job like this, and sort of give the reader the experience.
Yeah, I have a friend who's a retired DA, Oakland, Alameda County. And every now and then he'll get together with other DAs, and there's almost like a language. It's different. It's not normal language. It really is a special vernacular. And I would imagine that cops is the same thing. There's kind of a
lot of gallows humor. I mean,
yes.
Consider the job they do. It's very tough. It's very difficult. They have to go home to their families afterward, and then they have to sort of find a way to sort of process it. It was interesting to sort of find out what that little thing is, that little pivot. It's kind of interesting and fun to sort of learn.
Yeah, my parents were in the medical profession. My dad was a doc and my mother was a nurse in ER. And nobody ever came to our house for dinner twice because the conversation was so graphic. So Scott, what you have a very varied career. What drew you to crime fiction?
Yeah, I sort of didn't dive deep into crime fiction really until I started writing it, and then I had to kind of catch up and go back to the classics and also what's going on now. But I spent a lot of time, like you said, as a film critic, TV critic. So a lot of my influences are more from that realm, crime movies and TV shows that I devoured over the years. I almost accidentally ended up writing crime fiction because the first book, Charles Gate Confidential, when I first started it, I was trying to do it as a time travel story, and that just wasn't working. And I was like, I don't really have an affinity for this, and what would work better? And it turned out, crime fiction worked better. So that's when I really, got deeply into it.
Do you feel that your experience as a movie critic helped in terms of pacing and when to start, when to stop things, and dialogue? Do you feel that gave you an edge?
I would think so. I would think that's where that came from because, one thing I hear a lot about it is that the book is cinematic and it moves
very cinematic,
very fast. And I do rely more heavily on dialogue. I don't do a lot of 3-page descriptions of a room or anything like that. So it's the influence you can see from the screen, definitely.
Yeah, I felt it was very cinematic. I mean, I could see it as getting picked up, optioned, because it was very, very visual. It was great. So Jesse, crime fiction, you do middle-aged books, you do, Dial A for Auntie is sounds like a comedy. What draws you to crime fiction?
Well, I've always read crime fiction, and but at some point I got tired of it because there was just a lot of raping and murdering and mutilating of female bodies. And so I kind of took a break from it. And when I finally, got my foot in the door with publishing, I was like, I need to even the score. And I need to start doing the same to like the male characters in my books. And I guess it's kind of become like my thing now, where I treat men in my books the way that women have been treated in a lot of these like crime thrillers. And they're victims most of the time. And my female characters are the ones like going out there solving them and having all of this agency. And that's kind of why I do crime fiction, and I am having a lot of fun, especially with taking like a character that you wouldn't necessarily expect to see in crime fiction, like older.
Yes,
I guess,
yeah.
or now in the adult category. And yeah, I love it.
That's what I felt was very unusual about your book, having an old woman be the protagonist. And I had a very, very strong-willed mother myself, and it was actually very refreshing to see that, and not in the sort of a Cabot Cove, Jessica Fletcher mold, but someone who is who has warts and a definite point of view, but has a tremendous amount of integrity. And I thought that was really how you handled that very, very well. And she's unusual in this, genre. I think out of all the books that I read, I think you were the only one that had an older protagonist. I mean, someone who's like in their 80s. So, kudos to you. So standalones versus series, pitfalls and pluses. Let's start with you, Jess. Do you have a new series starting? You have standalones, yes. So pitfalls, pluses. Do you get attached to characters? Do you want to get rid of them? Do you want to kill them off?
I started out, my first mystery series was a 12-book series, the Murder by Month mysteries, came out in 2006. It is getting re-released at the end of this month.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm very excited for that. And I also went on to a thriller series. Salem Cypher was the first one that also just got re-released. But between then and the Taken ones, I've done 5 standalones.
Right.
And I kind of am partial to them. The Taken ones is the first in a series. The second one, The Reaping, comes out in September. I'm just writing the third one now. With the Taken ones, it started out with a short story, and I thought the story was just going to be a short story. I'd never have to do anything with it again. And so I wrote those 2 characters into a corner. I wrote them into an absolute corner with that short story. And so when it came time to turn it into a novel with the Taken ones, I really was unkind to myself. I really had to untwist a lot of stuff. And so, I love the characters. You get to love the characters. That's a positive with the series. Otherwise, I prefer standalones. You can just be one and done.
I think that also maybe you can be meaner in a standalone to your characters, because you don't have to carry them through several novels where, because if they're too mean, then you don't want to read about them again. But you have to make, there has to be tension in the book. So you have to make them sort of warty, but not too warty. But the standalone, I think maybe you can make them meaner, maybe more flawed. Tracy, what about you? Standalones versus series?
Well, I've only
I know.
series, yeah. So
Yeah.
I guess that's my jam so far. But I kind of am obsessed with the character arc. I like to see how people get through things. So I give them as much as I can give them at the beginning, some monkey on their back, some challenge, something that they've got to get over. And then my process is to sort of see how they get better or see how they get to the next stage. I did that with the first series with the Cass Rains. I've given her a trauma at the beginning, and then she's got to sort of deal with that as the books go by. Whether she gets better or not, depends.
That's very, very true with Harriet.
Yeah, with Harriet, it's the same. When we find her in that first book, standing on that sidewalk, deciding whether or not she wants to go into that police station or run, that's a good, interesting place for a character to be, because now you have all the possibilities. She goes inside, of course, or else they'd be, book, but she goes in, and then on top of everything that I've given her the worst possible partner that she could possibly work with. And then on top of that, a serial killer case. And so then we are in a position where we can figure out who this character is, whether or not she's going to move forward or back or stay where she is. And that's fun for me as a writer to sort of figure out that as I pick up through the books. And hopefully it's challenging and interesting for the readers too, to figure out whether or not Harriet's going to get back to where she needs to be.
I think you did a really nice balance in creating a character that has baggage that needs to be solved. But I felt that the book ended, that I'm interested in the second book because she obviously, this trauma is being carried forward, but I didn't feel that it was open-ended, if that's the right word, that I feel that the solving of the crime, but also that you did get the sense that she was going to move forward, but the end was the end in some ways, but also not in others. And I think you did a really nice job of walking that line.
Thank you.
So Scott, are you going to keep writing standalones?
I think so. If I was to sort of carry on characters, I'd like to kind of do it more in an Elmore Leonard way, where someone who was maybe a supporting character in one book turns up in another one, but it's not really about that character necessarily. I think probably I kill off too many of my characters to really.
A lot of people died in that book. Yes, yeah.
There are one or two who survived this one who I wouldn't mind checking in on somewhere down the line and see what they're up to.
I got real Carl Hyacin vibes from your book. Yeah, that the same kind of vibe, which I hope is a compliment.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't read a lot of him, but I think I see what you're getting at. Yeah.
So Jesse, do you see another book with Vera? Or is she done and not? Is she done?
I once read this other author describe like sequels, and she was like, the first book is you building like this sandbox and filling it with wonderful toys to play with. And with the second book, you realize you're trapped in the sandbox and no one can hear your screams. And
yes.
And I've
been there.
Spirit. So I've done a trilogy with Dial A for Aunties, and I did feel like each book was harder to write, like each subsequent book. And so I, with Vera, it did so well. So my publisher was like, let's have a second book. And I finished writing that second book. And I have no idea, beyond that, are we going to have a third? Who knows? I want to just let that be like a future me problem.
Yeah. Well, I know if you said you wrote a second book, but I think you could have Vera Wong as a standalone, because it's fairly complete. And I might like to see the son kind of get his comeuppance, but that's just wishful thinking, because he really isn't very nice to his mother. Not at all. Okay, so no, let's not ask that one just yet. So based on my reading over the last year, the thriller suspense trope seems to be dominating from what I was reading. And Would you call, even in your book, Tracy, the tried and true police procedural, the suspense is really quite marked. So do you think this is true in what you're reading? I mean, obviously, I didn't read anything for the last year, but what I received from the Eggers. But it really did seem to me that we were moving maybe away from whodunit to more why, more of there was a lot of domestic suspense, a lot of domestic suspense novels. So Jess, you're a master of suspense. What do you think? Do you think it's moving more into a thriller realm, the crime fiction genre?
Am I a master of suspense?
Yes, I think
Yes.
so. Yes, I think so.
I think for me, my bias is that there's so many great women writing thrillers these days, and it becomes more about the why done it than the who done it. And of course, the who done it is interesting, it's there, but the why done it makes it a character study, which is a story that sticks with you. And so I think as the crime fiction community becomes a much more accepting place of female writers of color, we're getting a lot more rich thrillers out there. I see it just getting better.
So you think that it's it is the more as we delve more into a characterization emphasis as opposed to the real plot, the very plot driven novel. And I would even say that's true for you, Tracy, even though, obviously you have a quite an elaborate plot and that's very satisfactorily that finishes off. But I would say that there's a tremendous amount of characterization in your book, with her, ruminating about why did her friend, I don't want to give away a spoiler, but, the trauma that she experiences with her partner and her own personal, trauma. And there's a lot of characterization, I think, in a book that is ostensibly a police procedural. Do you agree?
I do. And then I had my druthers, all of my thing would be character driven instead of plot driven. I could care less about the plot, but I have to have one, right? A book has to have
a nice one.
I have to have kind of a story. But if it was up to me, it would just be character. I knew early on before I even started writing, but whatever I wrote, it was going to be character driven. And so that's where my jam is. And my focus when I sort of start a book, including the Harriet series, is to figure out what's going to move Harriet from point A to point B. I mean, that's all I'm concerned about. Now I have to put a body somewhere. There has to be a crime. This homicide team has to work together to solve this thing and sort of get to the end. But my focus is what's going to make Harriet move. And that's what I concentrate on. And I think that's sort of a combination between the convention of the police procedural, because we have to have, I don't like tropes, I don't like the word conventions. There are conventions of a police procedural, things that we sort of expect as readers do and writers do too. And then on top of that is the invention, the stuff that we add to that conventional foundation. And so my character stuff, all that richness, all of those levels, all of that challenge, all of that trauma, that's my invention. And between the two levels, convention and invention, hopefully I get to the end and readers have a satisfying experience. But I'm really drilling down on Harriet and Vera and Samansky and Kelly and all the other homicide cops that are sort of working in one direction, try to get this killer. But very much character driven.
Yeah. Now, Scott, I would say that you might be on the opposite. You are more of, I don't know, suspense is maybe thrills and thriller. Do you agree with that?
I mean, yeah, I think this one certainly leans more towards thriller. I mean, it's not a mystery at all, really.
No.
So traditionally, so
it's more like who's going to be alive by the book.
Yeah,
that might be the mystery.
Yeah. I mean, I like, I kind of agree with what everyone else is saying. It's better if the characters are driving the story, rather than you're trying to fit them into something that's predetermined. With this one, with the structure of a road trip, it kind of just lent itself to, okay, incidents along the way, building suspense when they get there. But, I don't know. I still think there's something satisfying about a traditional on it though. And, I'm kind of tinkering away with one of those. So,
Well,
hopefully
yeah,
that's still at least a niche out there.
I definitely think, Chandler and Hammett were my initial gods, and you don't, certainly in Hammett, the no-name detective, almost nothing about this guy. And even in Chandler, you're like straining to find out who Philip Marlowe is. He was in the Army. That's about all you know about him. So I certainly think that there's room for that. But all the books that I read this year, yours did stick out in that it was definitely more almost a caper novel in a way, and that that many of the books were definitely character driven. Now, Jesse, I think obviously, you have this massive character in Vera, and she really dominates. She dominates the plot in a very satisfying way. I mean, you feel that you really know this woman, her hopes, her disappointments, her even her anger. I mean, she gets mad. So you feel more writing a character than a plot-driven novel is your jam?
Yeah, definitely. I have loved that shift within the thriller suspense genre. And another thing that I love about it is with these character-driven stories, we're getting more, I feel, of social commentary.
Yes.
Especially from the points of view of characters, people who might otherwise be forgotten. So like a lot of the I prefer calling them like psychological suspense rather than domestic suspense. But like a lot of the characters in them are housewives. And I love that we're getting kind of like a glimpse into someone who isn't traditionally given the limelight. And then it's always so much more complex and rich than we have always thought before. So yeah, I do love the character driven shift.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's that tension of drawing back the curtain slowly, right? We don't see the characters like, say like even with Philip Marlowe with Chandler. I mean, he only opens the curtain so far. And Hammett, the curtains are closed. I mean, you know nothing about the no-name detective. You don't even know his name. But interestingly enough, lots of Hammett's stories were like Red Harvest is all about the strikebreakers in Montana at Anaconda. I think it's Montana or one of those states up there. But it was about strikebreaking. And so that is kind of interesting, is that it was a very plot-based book with a lot of dead people by the end. But it was about the social unrest with the Anaconda copper mines and how they were trying to break the unions. Has the writing, career paths of writing changed? I've seen a lot of change. I mean, I don't know if I can say anything that's good, but a lot of change, that it seems to be much harder. Do you find your books changing? Or I don't want to say writing to market, because I think all of your books are really unique, but writing has become harder, and obviously the proliferation of the indie market as part of that. I mean, what has been your experience? I mean, you're all tremendously successful. You've got great books out there in the market. You've got lots of kudos, lots of awards, and so you're at the top of your game. But do you feel that that the market has changed, and has it influenced your writing, Tracy?
I don't know. I just write what I write.
You write what you write.
I write the story that I want to write, the characters that I want to write. I'm not thinking about marketing or anything like that while I'm writing. I'm writing about story, and that character arc again. And then after I'm done, then I sort of lift up off the page and figure out what happens to it after that. But the writing is one thing. That's the other side of it, marketing and positioning and all the rest of that. That's somebody else's profession, I think. It's not my job. Somebody else has to figure out where the book goes on the bookshelf or whatever. or what category it's in. I'm not even thinking about genre when I'm writing. I'm writing a police procedural because that's kind of what it is, but I'm not thinking that when I'm writing. I'm just thinking about story and character and pacing and dialogue and all of those craft things that a writer has to think about. And then whatever happens after the book is done, then I deal with that when I have to deal with it. But I'm thinking about craft first, story first, characters first, and the other stuff after.
Jess, do you feel the same, or do you feel that the market has changed? Has it changed your writing, or no?
I love Tracy's answer. I love that idea of you got to follow the story, right? Because it takes a long time to write a book. And so my first book came out in 2006. I wrote 18 books before I made hardly any money off of it. I was teaching full time, raising 2 kids by myself and just writing at night. And it wasn't until I wrote a book that nobody wanted to buy that I actually broke out, and it ended up being Unspeakable Things. Thomas Mercer picked it up. It got my first Edgar nomination, and it was a book that nobody else would touch but Thomas and Mercer. And so I think it is something about writing the story that you need to write. The market is, you can't chase the market. By the time your book is done, they'll want something different anyhow.
Yeah, yeah. And Jessie, what about you?
I actually think it's gotten easier because when I first writing like 14, 15 years ago, I remember feeling like I had to write white characters for anyone to want to. And even when I first started querying, I remember that I was querying with my old email address, which, you know, has Sutanto in the name, and I wasn't getting any bites. And so then I changed, like I got a new email address with my middle name, which is Quinn. And then I started getting requests, you know, and
That's really
I just felt I needed to hide the fact that I wasn't white. And whereas now I feel like, oh, wow, I can actually write about my own culture as authentically as I want to, and people want to read that. So to me, it has gotten easier as I feel like other writers before me have really fought for us to have a place in publishing, which I'm very grateful about.
I think that's just fascinating. And you know, being a white woman, you know, I'm not going to say I have a stigma of, you know, being a woman and not being published, but I mean the barriers must have been substantial. But now, you know, that's what, you know, publishers seem to want a much more diverse group of stories. And I think that's fantastic. Scott, what about you? You have a varied career. I mean, you just, you know.
I don't think I've been doing this long enough to have seen firsthand how it's changed. You know, I hear that from other people who've been at it longer. But, you know, previously my whole time writing pop culture and reviews and freelancing in that world, I definitely, you know, saw that change over time, and how, you know, newspapers kind of went away, and even online markets started drying up, and so, which is kind of why I moved away from that. So there were just less outlets for that kind of thing that would, you know, pay anything.
Right.
So with this, you know, I feel like I still don't really know what I'm doing. I'm just kind of feeling my way along, and whatever works at a certain time, I'll go with that.
Yeah. Given the lag time between publishing and writing, were these COVID books? Does anyone want to chime in? Were these books written during COVID, and did it affect your writing, how you normally write? Was it a boon, a bust, a difficult? I mean, were these COVID books or not? Am I thinking maybe they weren't? Or they were? No? Nope. Nobody wrote this during COVID?
Yeah, mine was, you know, I mean, depending on where you want to say the pandemic ended, if it ever did, it was kind of written after we were all in lockdown, put it that way.
Okay, so I just thought that might be interesting. Thoughts on AI? Threats? A threat? A not threat? are you worried about it? You know, I could see publishers trotting out books for 99 cents, and not, you know, I just paid $6 for a mocha at Starbucks. So I think if people could buy a lot of 99-cent books, and they might not be good books, but they're 99 cents, and they're you know, that's 6 cups of coffee. Anybody have any thoughts on AI?
You know, I was writing last week and I was stuck on a scene in my book, and I went to ChatGPT and I said, write this scene like Jess Lourey would. And it was awful, the scene that it gave me. It was terrible. It needed
Why does that make me feel good?
I needed so much editing. And so, I mean, right now, it's just not even close. There is no soul in AI writing. It's good for marketing. I think it's good for marketing writing, but as far as the future, I'm not too worried.
Tracy, what about you? Do you care about AI?
Not really. I sort of feel the same way Jess feels. I mean, a robot cannot have emotions, right? A robot has never been dumped on a Saturday night. A robot does not know the human experience. They can sort of ape it, but they cannot know it. And I think that's what writing is. We sort of tap into that human emotion, and you know how people operate, because we are people. And until a robot can sort of emulate that, I think we're good. I think we're safe.
I agree.
Scott, what about you, AI?
I mean, I definitely don't think it's a creative threat. I mean, it may be a threat in other ways and other forms of writing. You know, I mean, I'm sure it makes some jobs easier, but I mean, anyone sitting down to write decides they're going to be a writer and decides to go down that path, they're just, you know, they're never going to be, you're never going to write anything worthwhile. You've got to actually sit there and do the thinking and you know, yeah, I don't know, I don't know what the future is, but as far as you know, something I would ever want to read, definitely not.
And what about you, Jesse? Are you worried about AI at all?
I am. It's not good right now, but I think like it'll only get better.
It will.
Yeah, I think it's always learning, and one day it will become indistinguishable, I think. And you know, I have 2 daughters, and my 8-year-old, she's like, oh, I want to be a writer just like you. And I tell her, like, I don't know if writing will still be a thing by the time you grow up. Because, you know, I think right now we're not in danger of it replacing us yet, but I think certainly by the time she is grown up, I think it will be like what you said. You know, I think lots of people would be kind of just pumping out books and selling them for 99 cents.
Well, I think, I mean, personally, what I think might be the saving grace is voice. I think that's very hard to replicate. So I think if you have a book that has a really dominant voice, like your book, Jesse, is a very dominant voice, that might be the saving grace, because I think that's going to be hard to capture. But you know, I mean, I wonder if publishers could even scrape, you know, I mean, put a clause in your contract, don't scrape my books, because you know, you all have, you know, well, Tracy and Jess, you have a lot of books out there, and you know, you don't want them scraped, so that, you know, they can start writing, you know, Clark wannabes and you know, Lourey wannabes. I mean, I think it's interesting. So this naturally segues into your thoughts on the state of the industry, which you know, where AI is one elephant, but there are other elephants. I mean, I can think of an additional pachyderm, which is Simon & Schuster being bought by a hedge fund. I find that kind of scary, just because a book that might be, you know, are they going to buy something like, you know, Where the Crawdads Sing, that was been on the bestseller list for 2 years, which is a very unusual book? Are they going to play it safe? Do hedge funds play it safe? I don't know. I mean, does anybody have any thoughts where they think things are going?
You know, Jane Friedman has a wonderful newsletter about the business.
Yes, she's wonderful.
She had a really good article on it, and basically she said, we don't know yet. It could be very good news and it could be very bad news. I think we just keep telling our stories and I don't know, hope for the best.
I mean, when I first started publishing, it was there were 20 big publishers in New York, and now there's 3. So that kind of, that truncation of the market means that you just have a lot less choice because you have a lot less funneling into, you have 3 entities that are making choices as opposed to 20 entities making a choice. I did see something very interesting about analysis initially when the hedge fund announced that, they were buying Simon & Schuster, that Simon & Schuster has been at the forefront of publishing political books, very political books. And about the administration, pro and con, and that they were wondering if that entire market would just, be eliminated because they don't want that kind of controversy. That's not good for the shareholders. So I just think it's kind of an interesting twist in a way to what's going on in the market. Okay, so let's talk about what is next. We don't have much time left. So Tracy, what have you got on the board?
I'm just finishing up copy edits on the next Harriet. It's called Echo. It's due out in December.
Wonderful.
And the same team is back, and a new case, fraternity hazing incident, and separated by 30 years. One happened in 19 whatever, and then a current one sort of emulates that, and the detectives have to sort of figure out what the connection is.
Yeah, I mean that the whole hazing thing is yeah. My nephew nearly died of heat exhaustion because he was on a frat thing in Lake Havasu and basically got burnt to a crisp, and they had to take him to the ER. And anyway, so Jess, what's up for you?
The next book in the Taken One series, The Reaping, comes out in September. It has my most unexpected killer ever, but it has the same 2 detectives going up to northern Minnesota. And I just finished drafting the 3rd one. It's off with my freelance editor now. And I also, in between all of that, have a YA novel coming out in February.
Great. Yeah. So how was that experience shifting to a YA novel?
I love YA. There's so much good YA out there right now. It's just so character driven and the plots are so tight. I read a lot of it. And so it was a nice stretch to get away from a lot of I mean, it's dystopic, so it's still pretty dark, but to get away from murder was kind of nice.
Scott, do you have anything on the board?
I don't know for sure what's the next one is. I have a couple of different things and kind of depends which one jumps out. I've worked on and off for a few years on kind of an LA novel, kind of based on my time there, which was in the 90s and would encompass some of the things that were going on then, like the Northridge earthquake and the O.J. Simpson chase and fun stuff like that. But
yeah, fun stuff like that. So, Jesse, you have a new Vera book coming out? Yeah.
Yes, I'm in the process of editing it. I write 3 books a year because I have no chill. So I just finished writing a different book, and I'm still not done editing Vera 2. So it's a lot of balls in the air.
You're busy. So Elaine Cogdill said in the chat, she had an interesting question. What wouldn't you write? Is there anything you won't write? Anyone? Anything you won't write? You won't touch?
It's stereotypical, but I won't hurt animals in my books.
Yeah.
I just won't.
Yeah. What about you, Tracy? Will you not write something? You just refuse to go there?
I would probably steer away from kids in danger. I know that's sort of
That's my bread and butter.
Yeah, I know, but I sort of I can't, I don't know. I can read it, but I can't write it. I don't know what that says about me.
I can't even read it. But Scott, what about you? What would you write about?
I haven't found it yet. I'll keep going until I run into something.
Searching, right?
Yeah.
And what about you, Jesse? What won't you write about?
It's so funny because when you asked that question, I thought you meant genre, and I was going to be like, historical fiction. I would never write historical because.
Well, that's a decent answer. That's okay.
It just sounds like a lot of research, which I am allergic to. So.
Actually, I'm writing, my book that is coming out in June is a historical crime novel. And actually I can tell you that it's kind of fun. I spent 6 hours trying to figure out how to get from San Francisco to San Quentin prison because the bridge weren't built in 1930. And then after 6 hours of I will never see again in my life, I realized that there were car ferries. So that was, that was my like aha moment. So any advice for would-be writers or writers out there? Does anyone have any 2 cents that they feel? I mean, you sort of touched on this, Tracy. You just write what you write the book you want to write.
That and also keep writing. I think it's so easy to sort of stop and quit because you get all these rejection letters and you sort of get depressed about it. I mean, just keep writing. It's like priming a pump. The more you write, the better you get. And the better you get, the better your chances. So just keep writing.
Yeah, don't give up. What about you, Jess? Same thing? Anything else to add to that?
I absolutely second that. It's like anything else, you get better the more you do it. And it's never easy. I don't know any writer who thinks this is easy. And I'm 28 books in. And so if you stop because it's hard, you're stopping for the wrong reason. So just keep doing it. Just keep going.
Yeah. Scott, any words of wisdom?
Yeah, kind of the same thing, just to kind of develop a thick skin because
Yeah.
you can't take the rejections personally. It's easier for people to say no than it is for them to say yes, and that's always going to be true. So
Yeah, that's a
keep moving on.
good, yeah, that's a good thing to hang your hat on. What about you, Jesse? Any advice?
Yeah, I always tell people to lower your standards. Don't compare your first draft to someone else's final draft, which is what you will see in bookshops, and to kind of just go with the mess, and embrace it.
Yeah.
And
Well,
Claire,
and also,
here's a question for Curtis. Did you see that too?
No, I didn't. What's the question for Curtis?
Are each of you idea brainstormers, or do you let the story idea fairy come to you in its time? I love that question.
Please answer. We got like 30 seconds.
I can't answer it. I asked it.
Oh,
Jesse,
you asked it. Oh, I saw it, Kurt. Oh, does anyone want to answer that before we get cut off?
I'm a brainstormer. I grab, I reach for like the idea and I strangle it until it gives me what it wants. So I don't wait around for it to come to me. I have to kind of just yank it.
You yank it. What about you, Tracy?
I get an idea, I wrangle it to the ground.
wait, that's what I do. Second that.
And what about you, Scott?
Yeah, I kind of freewheel it. So if an idea comes to me in the middle of the night and it seems like a good one, I try to hang on to it. I figure if I wake up and I don't remember it, it was probably not that great an idea.
Yeah. Well, I want to thank all of you. And again, your books were a joy to read. Out of 275 books, you were the books that spoke to me and the panel. And I want to thank you and good luck.
Thanks, Claire.
Thank you.
Yeah. And I hope to see you at Left Coast if you're going. I'll be at Left Coast